Welcome to the 9th season of Smart Talks with Jovan, where we explore how flexibility driven by digitalization and emerging technologies is reshaping the future of energy and the way electricity system operate. I am joined today by Dr. Ana Trbović, member of UN Task Force on Digitalization in Energy and co-founder of Energy Web and Grid Singularity, where she works on developing Web3 based solutions for the energy transition. With extensive experience spanning energy innovation, policy, and digital technologies, Ana operates at the intersection of technology and market design, contributing to global discussions on how to enable more flexible and resilient energy system. Ana, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
It is a pleasure to have you with us. Before we start with the question, I would like to present a nice wine from winery Serbica. The name of wine is Ivana, and it is combination of Serbian original grape sort named Kvelinka and three French grape sorts Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and Pinot Blanc. So, cheers.
We can cheer to authentic innovation.
Yes. Okay. So, from your perspective, regarding your position in one task force and in your companies, could you briefly describe your role and responsibilities? And based on that experience, how do you define energy flexibility today? And how does this differ from how system operators and regulators typically frame it?
Briefly, not so much, but I can attempt. We are essentially in an era where the energy market has completely changed to what it looked like. And I'm not saying even years ago or decades ago. It's been progressively changing in a relatively short period when you consider innovation in other industries. We can say that the energy sector, as crazy as it sounds, is probably one of the least innovative because it relied for a long time on a very simple model and market design that is just, one large power plant, maybe one large hydro plant at some point. Then you had the so-called end consumers, end users. In between, you had the grid operators, and I'm saying plural now, but for most places, it was just one. And therefore, that was the management that you had to deal with those actors. Today, when we talk about policy and we talk about market design, we often don't know who to call end users because very often they're not end users. They're actually at the beginning. They're the prosumers. They're the ones selling to someone else. So those flows are very different now. They go in different directions. And therefore, we have this industry, which is a very important industry. It's an industry that it's highly regulated because security of energy is vital to any economy. 20%, it's part of your economic rights. And now in this legacy system, you have a different layout, a different market. You have so many actors, and you need to adjust both the policy and the technology to manage this market. And there is resistance. There is resistance because the innovation has not been forthcoming for decades. And now all of a sudden, within a short period of time, we're trying to use new technologies and to adjust to this reality while still being very accountable to this security aspect that is critical in the energy domain. Therefore, I've had, let's say, two types of roles. One is the one you mentioned first, which is on the policy side, which in the first part of my career was dominant. But now that I have been in the startup scene, and that's now been a little bit over a decade. It is something that I do on a pro bono basis because we need to share our experience. We need to share the insight that we have on where the technology is going. And the regulators do want to be informed. They do want to espouse new ways of doing things in the energy market, as long as it is better for the citizens. The second aspect of my career is obviously to manage the development, where it's going in different roles. I have been working with people who are mainly engineers, and there you need to understand, at least for the energy market, not just the computer science aspect of it, but also the electrical engineering, the energy system management, and put it all together. So to then go back to your question on flexibility, we have the flexibility that comes from flexible assets. So those are foremost batteries, storage assets, but also any asset that has a surplus and where you can shift demand. All of that comes together for flexibility. And there you have those that own the assets, and they can be very large suppliers of such assets, or they can be a home that has a certain capacity of a battery. And then there is, in the first instance, ideally some trading within a community at the spot market level, and then at the next market level, which would be the flexibility market. And there we have the role of usually the DSO, so the distribution system operator that wants to manage congestion and that ideally also wants to source flexibility. So instead of getting a dispatch from far away, to try to source locally to manage smaller congestion issues. And that requires policy. It requires digital infrastructure, and obviously the supply of such flexible assets.
Okay, thank you for this answer. So we can go on the second question. Flexibility is often presented as an alternative to traditional grid reinforcement. Mm-hmm. In which cases does this approach truly work in practice?
In practice, it is still in development, to be honest, because it requires new models where DSOs can apply so-called dynamic or time of use tariffs to impact the market, to impact what is happening in these different smaller spot markets before it goes onwards to other markets. So they, on one hand, need to develop better models, which requires modeling, research. And there are companies that provide this type of information, and there are DSOs that are more innovative than others. Back in 2020, when we had COVID, we did a live hackathon with DSOs from the Netherlands, mm-hmm. and also some utilities from Germany and from France. And we looked at different time of use tariff models. Some of them were in the law of one of the countries, and some of them were researchers proposing a model. Mm-hmm. I remember one of the researchers was called Aziz, so we called it the Aziz TOU model. And we tested, what will happen if you apply these different models? How does the energy community, how do the homes on the ground respond? And obviously had certain findings, and therefore this type of research is very welcome to understand how TOU models can be improved. Then there is this whole topic of infrastructure. Mm-hmm. To be able to implement such models, you need to have visibility in terms of the availability of the assets and what are the measurements at this point in time, how much flexibility is actually available, and where is this needed. And therefore, the focus has been on larger assets rather than smaller assets within energy communities. But it is going in that direction. There is more and more awareness that this potential is real. We as a company, and this is my great Singularity hat, actually did a study with the German Energy Agency that could be interesting for your followers, where the German Energy Agency wanted to know, what if we implemented energy community trading, not just as an islanded model within one small community, but what if you traded with the community next door and then up the level, and then we had regional trading among different regions in Germany. And we came to a discovery that was very important, which is that Germany would become a much more of a self-sufficient country with a much lower need to import electricity if it implemented this type of system. And this requires, obviously, always not so much policy change, but more fine-tuning and understanding how a certain more broader legislation can be implemented better. And also information, meaning smart metering, sensor metering. And there we come also to data interoperability. We come to the topic of data security, where Germany especially, but I would say also any regulator cares that data is protected and secure. And this is where my other hat comes in, which is EnergyWeb, which has made advances in decentralized data management, but not only data management, but also business logic implementation on a decentralized level, so that you can have a more trusted way of implementing and verifying data structures and different services that are being run. So there are ways to do this, but many parts of the world, Europe included, are still not fully digitized in terms of metering that's available, in terms of interoperability of different systems. We're still having very strong discussions about DSO-TSO interoperability. And we still didn't get as far as making sure that energy communities and those that manage them are part of that discussion and have that type of access. And last time we met was at ENLIT, the energy industry conference. And there we talked about this, and we talked about how for many applications that are possible to do technically, access is the blocking factor, and that it's not like your phone where you can access a number of apps. You're still not able to use your smart meter as a phone. You're still not able to say, hello, can I just connect and have a demand response service or be a part of an energy community? We're still far from that level of interaction and ease of access to these novel services.
Yes, but we have in Europe some laws for protection from consumers.
Absolutely, GDPR. Yes, we have the laws. The issue is, and it's not even an issue to be compliant with GDPR. It's more that there is fear that there could be a security breach if you provide too many service providers with access to data. And the other issue is creating silos of data. And decentralized technologies today help us to avoid that, so that these silos don't become a security threat. However, there is still this incumbent legacy thinking that you should keep all in one server. So there also has to be a leap in terms of the approach and understanding what are the new market possibilities and why they're better for citizens.
Yes, we have in many European states the law that distribution system operator must enable data to consumers. either via web service or via smart meter. But what is your experience to citizens use that in practice?
That works, and the but is that citizens don't have sufficient either, both education and means to do that. So generally, this is done by companies that manage the assets on behalf of citizens. And then these companies that manage the assets, for example, they may be leasing PVs and batteries to a community. They're the ones that do this for the citizens. And the issue there is that they're also the ones that could provide another service to the citizens. And because they already have access, their preference tends to be to provide a service that may be of a lower quality, but that they can provide directly rather than enable citizens to have choice. This is the situation on the ground. It's like that everywhere, where we have, been present. And the other issue is that, for example, we have a software where you can manage energy communities. You can enable trading within that community based on the local legislation. It is grid aware, and therefore you integrate all the billing, taxes, charges as applicable, because what is billed needs to be fully aligned with the law. That's in every country in the world. And in Europe, you cannot reveal to the citizens the consumption data until this data is verified by the DSO. And sometimes that means a 3-day delay. So imagine having an app where you check your results and you have a day and you have a month. And then today is a certain day, but your app shows something from 2 days ago because you're not allowed as an app provider, even though you have the results of that day.
Yeah, it is not a technical problem.
It's not a technical issue, but until it's confirmed by the DSO and until you get the signal from DataDis, for example, in the case of Spain, or whatever software is in another country, you're not allowed to show that data.
So these companies you mentioned, which manage for citizens, they are some kind of aggregators.
In a way, they just tend to be usually companies that lease assets. So they will, for example, let's say you have a place where there are 20 homes. They will lease PVs or maybe even sell PVs. And maybe they will lease a battery. It depends how complicated it is in a certain jurisdiction. Believe it or not, it is actually, in some countries, you're not even able to share a battery by law, which is crazy because this is critical to scaling any type of local trading flexibility platform. And so these companies, then what they offer to the citizens, they offer them a discount.
Discount.
Yes, and they take all the profit.
It is motivation of citizens.
It's not only motivation. So yes, I mean, the citizens pay for a service. Yeah. They end up paying less for their electricity, but they never make money because all the profit is made by the company.
Okay.
So it's the company that uses the surplus to sell either to another citizen within the same community or to the grid, at the grid, whatever power purchase rate is.
But will citizens have smaller bills?
Yes, so it is positive.
Oh, okay, so
it is very positive. It is very good for the citizens. But if there were an easier way, the citizens could just also make money.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying, right? But these companies play a role. They play an important role because there is a gap in education, in technology awareness, and therefore you need these type of companies.
Okay, so educated citizens can earn money.
Yes, it is not unusual that pioneers in different places in Europe tend to be retired engineers with technical knowledge and the drive. And many of these people, I would say almost everyone that I have met, also have the sustainability drive, and they have done it even more so to be contributing to the environmental protection, safeguarding the environment, at least as much as saving money. Obviously, people who end up joining and then you expand, whenever you do the research, economic factors come first. But those that were pioneers tend to be very green-minded and in that sense, very, very socially aware individuals.
Okay, but the expenses for traditional grid reinforcement are very expensive for distribution system operator. And you mentioned that flexibility is on the beginning, but do you expect that flexibility will completely eliminate that expenses or decrease?
You will always need cables. You will always need the grid. In theory, if you optimally use all of your local resources, you will need less for the grid infrastructure. But in the first instance, you need to have the digital infrastructure everywhere to be able to use those resources. Over time, it will be less expensive, more secure, more stable. And unfortunately, many grid operators still see flexible resources more as a burden, challenge at least, for management than a resource. And things are moving faster in areas that have more issues, such as Australia, for example, that also as a result have more sustainable resources, and that also happen to have less competitive environment when it comes to grid management. So decisions are made faster. And there are some very innovative approaches, and this is taken with a lot more. I would say it's prioritized more highly than it is in other parts of the world.
Okay. So we can continue with the next question. What are the main technical and market bottlenecks that currently prevent large-scale deployment of flexibility services at the distribution level?
Yes. Actually, in my role as part of the UNEC task force on digitalization and energy, we put together a document, a report that we call the Grid Edge study, and we have mapped these factors. One is one that we have mentioned already, which is metering, and we often say sub-metering because it's not sufficient to have household net metering. You actually want asset level consumption, asset level production to optimize even further. There are still even in Europe places where this has not been rolled out. Or you may have an older meter that only does net metering, so there are some limitations as a result. Or you may have PVs, they may have older sensors, and that you cannot get the data at the granularity level that you need, and therefore you cannot include it in any of the demand response or energy trading applications. So sub-metering is one. Two is what I would call very broadly a flexibility registry, meaning that you have a certain ontology, data access, data management system, ideally at the level of the EU, but more practically, politically likely to be at the level of an EU member, where with this type of system, having the ability to have interaction, interoperability of data, not just for DSOs and TSOs, but also anyone wanting access to people's energy data to provide the service in a secure way, privacy embedded way. And there we have the new technologies, especially blockchain, that could be used to implement it in a decentralized way and protect the data better. So that's the second one. And then the third is specific legislation. For example, at the EU level, you have a very wide guideline relating to energy trading. But at the member state level, it tends to be narrowed, meaning that you have a lot of freedom, but within a very small geography, or you can go wider in a certain geography, but the functionality is very limited. This is how it is set up at the moment. And there is fear with regards to trading between communities and how that will roll out. And we have, as a company, as a result, been very present in different innovation projects where we demonstrated the benefits of both trading within a community and between communities. But none of these have been mainstreamed yet. It is therefore slow in coming, as I announced at the beginning. And this is why flexibility is implemented more widely at a higher level of supply. So meaning PV parks, larger aggregation assets. That's been more of a priority, at least in Europe, for time being. And the rest is just looked at as innovation, pilot use cases, moving very slowly to further demonstration. So there is more and more interest in flexibility markets, but starting with these larger assets.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Anna. This concludes the first part of interview with Dr. Anna Trbović. And in the second part, we will explore the role of digital technologies, data, and market design in enabling flexibility at scale.